Welcome back, everybody. I'm Jack, your host at DEGN Talk. Today we have Ethan, or Tabasco, from Particle Network. Welcome, Tabasco.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Straight off the bat, please introduce yourself and Particle Network, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my name is Tabasco. That's not my real name, of course. My real name is Ethan. I am the COO at Particle Network. Particle Network, kind of the TLDR of what we do, is that we, really since we started a few years ago, have always been uh, building things that improve user experience. And so we started doing like social logins and account abstraction. We ended up being one of the largest account abstraction providers throughout like 2023, 2024. Especially as, after ERC 437, we really ramped up and we started building that type of infrastructure. And so we were pretty successful in that. And then in, kind of early 2024, we started to work on this problem of chain abstraction. That's kind of really where we sit today. So we identified that, we had kind of built up this infrastructure stack over the past few years of trying to solve for the kind of like onboarding complexity that a user typically faces, the entry into Web3. So they have to, typically create a wallet and save a private key and write that private key down, these kinds of things. So we solve that effectively with social logins. You can get into an app using your Google account, and then you can do things like gasless transactions or pay gas with USDC and that kind of stuff. Then we realize that that's an important problem to solve, but there's actually a whole other side of this problem that is maybe even more important, especially when it comes to actually growing and retaining users in Web3, which is this issue of chain abstraction, which is becoming a larger problem as the space scales. And really what it boils down to, and we can talk more about it later, it boils down to the fact that Web3 is perpetually fragmenting itself into more and more ecosystems, into more and more chains. I'm using Solana, I'm using Ethereum, I'm using Base, Arbitrum, Avalanche, I'm using BNB chain. And so the way that we've set up the space in that sense, from a user experience perspective, introduces an enormous amount of complexity. I need to manage my balance for each of these chains. So I need to say, what's my BNB chain balance? What's my Base balance? What's my Solana balance? If I want to get my assets between those chains, I now need to go and find a bridge and then, execute a transaction on that bridge from chain A to chain B. So I need to not only to keep track of my balances, but then I need to go and actually bridge and have gas tokens to bridge. And then I need to have multiple different wallets for different chains. And so the whole way that the space is set up today, in the fact that it's siloed between chains, is incredibly confusing for anybody, not even just new users, but just overall. It's a very inefficient way of looking at applications. And so by siloing everything, like just destroyed any potential of real user onboarding or like major innovation in the application sector. And so we solved that problem throughout 2024. We could get more into the specifics, but we solved that problem with our own infrastructure stack that basically allowed you to kind of like consolidate your balances on multiple different chains. So my balance on BNB chain is the same balance that I have on Base and on Solana. And there's no distinction between different chains. It's just like your on-chain balance. So we fixed that problem. And then really the main thing that we've been focused on throughout 2025 is we launched, so Particle Network is both an infrastructure brand and we have our own sub brand called Universal X, which is growing quite popular lately. And Universal X is actually a trading app that we produced to kind of like prove the whole thesis that chain abstracted user experience is superior. And so I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but we could talk more about this. Basically, we launched a trading app back in December, and we've been focusing on that as well throughout 2025, and it's been quite successful. So these are the kind of the two main areas of things that we focus on: the infrastructure side with solving that problem of fragmentation, and the application side with Universal X.
Awesome. We'll definitely dive deep into that. Before we go deep, though, we'd love to know your journey in Web3. Please
Yeah.
give us a breakdown of your journey.
Absolutely. It's kind of it's a relatively interesting journey, I would say. I first got into the space when I believe I was either 14 or 15. And so it was right when the pandemic hit in around 2020. Decided that I wanted to basically find a way to make money because I wasn't old enough to start working. And so I thought that mining Dogecoin seemed like an interesting way to make money. And so I set up a Dogecoin miner in my house and started making $1 a
Very
day or
clever.
$2 a day. And I was like, wow, I'm making $2 a day from literally doing nothing. I can't believe it. Like this is huge. And so it got me hooked a little bit. And then I started investing. I started buying some like tokens like Dogecoin and Bitcoin. And back then I was really into Harmony One. I don't know if you remember that, but that was unfortunately they had some incident back a few years ago, and they're no longer around today. But that was my favorite token for a while, and that's an ecosystem that I participated in. So I was around 15 or 14 or 15, and really into crypto. And then I decided that I wanted to start building in the space. So I taught myself Python and JavaScript and a few other programming languages around 15, and started building a few apps in the space, and kind of started to learn how you can build dApps. And I started with building, like Discord bots, a bunch of different things. Then when I was 16, had still been doing, because, when the pandemic hit, when COVID hit, I moved from in-person school to online remote school, which I actually really enjoyed that because I was never a big fan of like doing the traditional in-person schooling. But when I turned 16, things started to open up again, and I had a choice to make. This is the choice that my parents gave me, at least. It was either you can go back to school and go back to in-person school and have some social interaction in person, or two, you still need social interaction. So either you can stay on remote school if you really want to, but you need to go and get a job. And so I said, okay, well, I really don't want to go back to school, so I'm just going to get a job, and then I have some money and I can, I have more flexibility. So I got a job, and the first job I got was at a tire shop, a local tire shop near where I live. I live in Colorado, near Denver, and I started working there. And your job is you're repairing tires and changing tires on cars, and I hated it. I'm not a very strong person, so like doing that for eight
It's
hours a
one of
day,
those
like,
jobs.
right,
It's like doing the
exactly,
paper rounds, right? It's like
yeah.
checking out at the supermarket sort of thing. It's one of those jobs.
It's yeah, exactly. It's very monotonous. It's very physically intense, and it's just like I hated it so much, but I would was more keen on doing that than going back to school. But I realized one day that like I don't need to force myself to do this anymore. I think I was making like $18 an hour, which wasn't too bad, but I was like, I don't think I can. I want to force myself to do this anymore, but I also really don't want to go back to school. So, I've been doing this crypto thing for a little while, and I've been building some apps in the crypto space. So maybe there's an opportunity there that I can take advantage of. And so I created a LinkedIn profile and I created a resume with some free resume builder online. And I applied to like 200 jobs, like every job listing I could find that I even looked remotely qualified for. I was like, and my resume was like, 16 years old, is in high school, is working at a tire shop, and has built like one dApp on
Yeah, it's
chain.
like tire shop. So what
Right.
Web3 experience do you have? I worked at a tire shop.
Right, exactly. That's basically what my resume looked like. That's what my LinkedIn profile was like. And I was like, oh man. But actually, what ended up happening was I got an interview with one company somehow. It was a company called Chainstack. And Chainstack is probably, most people haven't heard of it. It's an RPC provider. They do very like deep developer focused
Yep, I
infrastructure.
think I heard that. Yeah.
They're pretty big. They're kind of like a competitor to Alchemy or any of these larger providers. And I got an interview there to do developer relations. This was a role that I was somewhat familiar with, but I felt like I could pull off because it required like a decent amount of technical experience, but you weren't engineering anything. It was a lot of like just talking to people, and so I can do that. And so I somehow got accepted into that position, doing very like I was kind of like an internship. I think I was making like $1,000 a month or something like that, or $2,000 a month. It was, they were giving me an
That's
opportunity that was,
yeah, no, I mean that's still
yeah.
money, right? It's money is money. Yeah.
At 16, that was a lot of money to me. I was like, wow,
That is,
I'm
yeah.
making bank on this. This is crazy. And so I really enjoyed doing that. I enjoyed kind of that environment and working at that company. And so I rose the ranks in that company to eventually leading the developer relations team over there. I think shortly after I turned 17, that's whenever I started doing that. And then, so I was there for about a year and a half, and eventually a recruiter told me about Particle Network. They messaged me, and now in developer relations, you get a lot of like it's a very sought after role, and so anybody with any experience in developer relations, they're constantly getting headhunted. But so Particle Network was something that really particularly interested me because I had met them at a few events prior, and I was familiar with their tech, and I really liked their tech. And so I said no to most headhunting opportunities because I was comfortable where I was. But I said yes to Particle. I said I'll have a conversation, and so I got on a call with the CEO. His name is Pong Yu, and we had a conversation. I was pretty intrigued at what they're building and the opportunity there, and I offered. I said, well, he was in San Francisco at that time
Mm,
for Stanford Blockchain Week, and I
yeah.
offered. And I said, hey, it's a 2 hour flight. I'll come down there. We can have dinner tomorrow, and we can have a conversation in person. And so the next day, I got in a flight, flew down to San Francisco. We had a very long conversation at dinner, and then I flew back that same day. I was sold on the vision and kind of what he wanted to build, and so that's when I joined Particle doing developer relations. And so it's been almost 2 years since.
Yeah.
As I started originally at Particle doing developer relations, and I eventually started doing head of developer relations. So I led that part of Particle, and then quite recently, just over the past month or so, I moved into the COO position. So that's a little bit about my journey. I've kind of gone from that, working at a tire shop a few years back to now I'm 19. I'll be 20 in a few months, and working at Particle.
That is crazy. You're only 19. Jesus. What am I doing? I should end the podcast right here, right now. Nah, no, it's first of all amazing. huge congratulations. And yeah, the vision of Particle Network really is here to solve issues, right? To solve the fact that, we have hundreds of chains, and it's a mission, right? It's like figuring out how to get from point A to point B on a map. Coming back to Particle Network then. So what's your current focus at Particle right now?
Yeah, it's a good question. In 2024, that's when we announced, I wouldn't call it a pivot, but it was really, I guess you could consider that to some degree. We announced basically that we are going to focus on chain abstraction, that we're going to dedicate our infrastructure stack towards solving that problem. We were satisfied with what we had built before, and we still offer the same things that we had built over the past, over 2022, 2023. But actually myself, it took me a while. Like, I didn't immediately buy into the idea of chain abstraction. It took me a little while to come around to it. But when we decided that we wanted to do it, we basically went all in. And chain abstraction at that point, was it was a narrative that people had never heard of before. There's maybe one or two other organizations that were doing chain abstraction or that had referenced this name before. I think it was
Yeah, I didn't quite
near.
understand it the first time I heard the term. I was like,
Yeah,
um,
it's a very vague term, and so still
it
it
sounds
doesn't have.
boring and vague.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
it was never defined very well, but at that time especially, it was like basically a brand new narrative that was just kind of forming. And so we took a risk in that we said, listen, this is a real problem that has gone unsolved in the space, and we're equipped to solve it. And so we're basically going to drop everything and go all in on solving this problem. And we believe that there's ROI in doing that. And so we basically, we announced, hey, we're doing chain abstraction. And then throughout 2024, we quite relentlessly pushed the whole chain abstraction vision and try to make people understand what exactly we're building here and why this is important. We're pretty successful at that. I think people understood, throughout 2024 more and more what exactly it was and who was building within it. And we saw over the course of that year that, it grew from like 3 or 4 organizations building in chain abstraction to like 20, 30 organizations building in it. And so you even had like Vitalik talking about it on multiple stages at different events. And so, which is great. And this is exactly what we wanted. And then I think it was September, we had finished our infrastructure. We had finished what we actually wanted to build towards chain abstraction, which is something that we call universal accounts. Universal accounts is the infrastructure side of what we build. It's a developer-facing product. It effectively allows you to have a single balance that is usable across every chain without bridging. And that's the most basic way to explain it, is that if I have 5 USDC on Base, 5 USDC on BNB chain, and 5 USDC on Solana, my balance is 15 USDC that I can then go and spend wherever I want. And so there's no distinction between my balance on chain A and chain B and chain C. It's just my balance on chain. So you effectively remove the need to ever think about bridges or gas tokens or what chain am I connected to or what chain is this DApp built on. You're kind of freeing applications and users from those typical like mental constraints that you have when interacting with dApps today. And so we finished that back in September, and we started beta testing it internally and getting some initial implementations, which is when in December we launched the first app that would ever be built within this kind of chain abstraction paradigm, which was called Universal X. And Universal X initially for us was kind of like a tech demo of sorts, where it was basically like it was like a swap interface or a trading platform where you could go and you can connect and you could deposit tokens from any chain and then spend them collectively without bridging. So it was kind of that property that I mentioned, but it was in an application environment that you could actually use on mainnet, which was a pretty huge technical accomplishment because it sounds simple, like, oh, I just have my balances, I can use them all collectively. But from a technical standpoint, actually achieving that is very complicated. You have to have like intent-based bridging. You have to have, signatures that actually aggregate multiple operations collectively. So you do one signature that's signing for multiple operations. You need to have a good solver system that can actually fill transactions quickly at low cost. And so there's a lot of components that go into creating that and making that happen. And so we launched this app to kind of prove to everybody, like, hey, we weren't bullshitting when we said that this was a real thing, and we've built it, and here's what it is. And surprisingly, Universal X had 2 major points of interest. First of all, developers kind of flocked to it and said, hey, we really want to replicate this in our own apps. When are you going to release this publicly for us to use? And then also this was our intention initially, but it was initially more than we expected, which was a lot of traders went to Universal X and said, hey, this is a really interesting property that no other trading platform offers. And, I think you guys should double down on this and make it a true trading platform. And so we kind of try to meet both of those needs in that After that happened throughout the course of Q1, we focused on two things. Number one, universal accounts. We rolled this out as infrastructure. So we actually just recently announced the first, I believe it was around 10 dApps that integrated universal accounts and that are chain abstracted, fully chain abstracted. So you can actually go and use them, and you can have your assets from any chain and use them collectively on that dApp without bridging. So it is the embodiment of this vision, and there's already 10 that are live today. We still don't have the SDKs public, so we're only giving them to a handful of apps selectively. So we're doing like 10 apps every few weeks just because we want to roll it out progressively, and we don't want it to be a messy SDK launch. And so we're just kind of going very deep with a few different teams, and we're working with them very closely to launch it. And so that was one goal that we had: launch the SDKs and get some initial dApps to use it and get their feedback and start making sure that really, as a goal, every dApp can be chain abstracted. And we don't want to be reckless with that goal, because I believe that is probably one of the most important things in terms of user experience that we can do as an industry. And so we're starting to roll it out. The second goal that we realized actually had a lot of potential was Universal X was surprisingly a really strong revenue stream. And that initially, even just from the first version, which was a very rough version, it was already earning a decent amount of revenue. And so we felt, well, traders have an appetite for this, and there's no other trading platform in the market that has this type of moat, and it's a good way to earn revenue from an application perspective. And so we're going to also double down on this. And we're also going to kind of like branch off part of Particle Network into managing this trading app as like our own flagship application. So like very similarly to, I'm sure you're familiar with like Jumper and LeFi, right? Jumper, the bridge or whatever you want to call it, Swap plus Bridge, they're like a subsidiary of LeFi, or like Stargate and Layer Zero, or even like Warpcast and Farcaster. Same team, but one is an application and then the other one is the infrastructure arm. So we wanted to kind of replicate that. We said we want to have like an application arm of Particle that focuses on this app that we've kind of validated to generate revenue. And so throughout Q1 and really over the course of 2025 so far, we have been allocating a huge amount of resources and focus towards just growing and iterating on Universal X, to the point where now Universal X is making a lot of revenue for us, like a significant amount. And I would say in terms of the whole market, it's definitely top 10 trading platforms in Web3 in terms of like spot volume. So that's great. And that's kind of what we wanted. Our goal, of course, though, is to get it to top 3. And I think we can do it. Universal X is a very unique platform, and it's basically the only one that has this chain abstraction mode, and it's very fast and very data rich, and there's a lot of interesting features about it that brings traders to it. So we wanted to build the application arm and build the infrastructure arm, and that's kind of been our focus throughout this year.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct. With the whole meme season going on right now, right? Everyone's going crazy with that stuff. So multiple different trading platforms getting record kind of revenue, right? And yeah, no, I think it's definitely the right way to go. Now, a lot of things happening, right? A lot of technical feats that needs to be, overcome, achieved, etc. Do we have a rough roadmap for what we're trying to achieve in the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that people always ask me on these podcasts was always when TGE. And so I was always like saying, oh, I don't know at some point. But we launched our token, I think it was around 2 months ago at this point. It was a PARTI party. That's what we launched. It was listed on
So
OKX
this is
and
where the
Binance.
real journey begins, right? Because
Exactly. Yeah.
TGE is a milestone, right? And one thing that we want to know on this podcast is what's after TGE, right? Everything here
Exactly.
is after. So exciting
Yeah.
stuff.
And I like that positioning. And, I think a lot of teams, they'll never say this, but they do believe, they see TGE as like, okay, hey, we've launched a token, we can relax now. But this is actually the opposite has happened in our case. I think I'm working more than I was before
Gotta keep
TGE.
building,
It's
yeah.
like, yeah, because TGE is great, but the only thing that matters in this space, and for some reason, I don't know why more people don't realize this, but in my opinion, especially after TGE, the only thing that matters from a business perspective is revenue. How do you generate
Yeah,
revenue? How do you
yeah.
generate income? How are you profitable? This isn't like a revelation. I mean, this
That's
is
the
just like
core value of the project, right? If
right,
you're not
exactly.
making money, why are people, do you know what I mean? Why are people holding your token? You might as well just, start something new.
And you'd be shocked. Like, there's so many protocols. I feel like the majority of protocols in this space are not profitable because it's not a priority. It's just, okay, launch our token, do some events, and then, I don't know, we kind of float for a few years. But this is, if you're really serious about doing anything in this industry, you have to generate revenue. If you're not generating revenue, serious revenue, then you're not serious about what you actually want to accomplish and the whole thing that you're shilling on Twitter. And so revenue is the number one most important thing. And so our roadmap really consists of how do you scale revenue? How do we, at the moment, we're making, I would say, considerably more revenue than most projects in the space are, but of course we can do better. And I think the ceiling is incredibly high, especially with the combination of Universal X and with the infrastructure side. So our roadmap right now, especially on the Universal X side, we're getting ready to hopefully this week launch limit orders, which has been a massive feature that people have been asking us for, and we've been taking some time to make sure that it's an effective feature, that it works well. And so we're going to be launching that hopefully tomorrow or Monday. So we'll see. When that does go live, I think people are going to like it quite a lot. It's one step. I think, Universal X has a ways to go before it, for example, has complete feature parity with platforms like Photon or GMGN. But I think it's going to get there faster than most people expect. And I think my hope is that, throughout by the end of Q3, hopefully, Universal X will not only be, the only chain abstracted platform on the market for trading, but also it'll have fundamentally the fastest execution and the most pure trading features. And so if you combine these three things, chain abstraction, which nobody else can do, fast execution, which everybody's trying to have fast execution, but I think we can deliver on being one of the fastest, as well as a huge amount of data and features to trade with. I believe that Universal X can scale to being one of the top 3 revenue generating trading platforms in the market. And maybe we can come back in 4 or 5 months and see if that statement ends up being true. But I'm very confident in that. And I think that Universal X, and I talk about it on Twitter all the time, I believe that Universal X has something that nobody else can match. And we have a huge potential in that regard. And this is really what we're focusing on in terms of roadmap, is how do we keep launching more features. So we have limit orders. We're going to have, we're launching a bunch of speed improvements very soon. We're going to be launching a huge reward system very soon for traders, and a bunch of other feature improvements, and new token tracking and a bunch of other stuff, Twitter tracking, wallet address tracking, the things that everybody wants whenever you're trading. That's all going to happen hopefully just over the next few months, when this is our number one focus. And on the infrastructure side, a big item on our roadmap is going to be our SDK going public to use for anybody, hopefully by late Q3, if not early Q4. We could, if we wanted to, do this tomorrow, but like I said, we want to be conservative with how we roll it out. So we're choosing a few dApps. I think our next kind of cohort of dApps that will go live will be hopefully by the end of this month, if not kind of early next month. And then those go live. Those will be 10 pretty big names, I'm hoping. And then we'll probably have 2 or 3 other kind of cohorts of 10, 15 dApps or so that we're going to incubate ourselves that are going to go live. And then we'll launch the SDKs publicly at that point for any dApp to integrate any project. And then I think it's going to have pretty big network effects after that. And we're going to see and I've said this on a lot of podcasts, but my hope is that, especially by end of year this year or early next year, I think a large chunk of dApps in this space are going to be chain abstracted. And my hope is that they're going to do that through universal accounts. And I think we're on the path to making that happen. We built out the infrastructure. We're starting to roll out the SDKs. We're starting to improve it. And I think the appetite is there. It's a real problem that needs to be solved. And so this, paired with the in-premise Universal X, to drive more revenue. And we also generate revenue from the infrastructure side. Not as much immediately, but we will over time, especially as that grows significantly. So yeah, this is kind of the way that we're thinking about it, and this is what we're prioritizing.
Sounds extremely exciting. Let's move on to your community, right? Your token holders, etc. What's in store for them, and any alphas you want to drop? Any upcoming campaigns?
Yeah, we have a lot. I can't share the exact details, but we're going to be launching a pretty big campaign on Universal X quite soon. Really, we've been trying to build up a community of traders on Universal X internationally. So from the US, from the Chinese market, from Vietnam and Thailand and Korea. And so we've been trying to have a very diverse set of community members that are actively trading and using Universal X, giving feedback, that kind of stuff. And so we're going to be rewarding these traders. And we have a lot of campaigns planned really quite soon, hopefully over the next 1 or 2 months that are going to do that. We did have a pre-TGE campaign that happened on Universal X called Party Diamonds. We used that to actually airdrop to traders on Universal X, and a lot of them got a pretty solid airdrop. And so we've launched a token, of course, so there's not going to be some TGE or anything that people can ask about. But we're going to have rewards for actually trading on Universal X. I think are going to be significant, as well as a number of other social activities I think are going to be good. And then, really, our main focus is how do we just take feedback. So what we did recently is we've been paying our community members straight up, giving them tokens for giving us feedback. That we've been having feedback sessions with the community members, and they give us good feedback. We give them tokens. And so these are the types of things that we want to have a positive loop. We want to be very transparent, and we want to listen to the people that are actually using the product. And I see this as being one of the best ways to actually scale in terms of revenue and user base. Is if somebody has a suggestion, if somebody has a problem or something that they want to see improved, you listen to them, You can even reward them for voicing that, so you have that positive reinforcement and more people talk about the things that they want to be improved, and then you end up with a much better platform than you could have ever created by yourself. And so this is kind of the way that we're thinking about community engagement, centering it around Universal X a lot, and trying to reward the people who are engaging with us, and beyond that, just using the platform itself. And so I think we're going to be making some pretty big announcements over the next, throughout the rest of this month even, that are going to be, I think, pretty exciting for those that are either token holders or just using Universal X every day.
Yeah, we'll make sure we'll give you some extra exposure from us as well.
That'd be sick.
Particle Network, amazing. So you mentioned about releasing SDKs very soon, right? Any tips for your builders or developers that wants to use that SDK, and would they be getting any support from Particle Network in terms of grants and stuff? Is there anything like that on the horizon?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, if there's any builders that want access right now, we can give it. Like I said, we're just being a little bit selective with who we give access to. So if you're building something and you think that it could really benefit from chain abstraction, and that you think it's a use case that's unique and that could see more benefits from this than other kind of more generic verticals could, then we are probably down to give you access. So just hit me up. We can do it. We could include you in one of these upcoming cohorts. We've been trying to have in each cohort a very diverse set of apps. So the first one that we just announced, last week, there was a perpstex, and we had 2 pretty big betting platforms, and we had some of the largest games in the ecosystem, as well as there's like some NFT stuff and some other apps. So we try to get like one app from each major vertical. And so we're just trying to keep it very diverse to see different use cases, what works best, what generates the most like user retention, what generates the most revenue, and so what can we focus on. And so if you have a unique use case, just let me know, and I can probably get you SDK access. Otherwise, the SDKs will go public, I think, hopefully. Like I said, my ideal timeline is by the end of Q3, if not, late this year. And in that case, whenever it does go live, of course, we're going to have a huge amount of developer resources, workshops, and videos and documentation. We're going to have 24/7 DevRels. We already have a DevRel that's very active in supporting the developers that we do give access to. So that will happen late this year. And in terms of grants and that kind of stuff, we might have a grant program. I don't know for sure. It'll depend on how these initial cohorts go and how much we want to incentivize usage. But to be fair, I don't exactly think that you need a grant program if there's enough natural demand for your product. I think grant programs are good, but I don't always see a huge amount of value from them, especially if your SDK and your developer product speaks for itself. Grant programs are good if you're building a chain and people have a lot of options, and it's like, okay, well, I want people to build on my chain because it's a little bit better. But with chain abstraction, there's nothing else like it. And so I think if you want to build with it, then you want to build with it. And so it's just a matter of demand. And so we might, but I'm not a huge fan of it, especially with this type of product, because I believe that it can grow on its own without needing to incentivize people.
Awesome. So moving on, I would love to know your personal view on the current market landscape, all the AI agents, etc., memes and stuff. What's your take on it?
It's very, very speculative. If you asked me a year ago, I would have said, "Oh, I hate how speculative everything is, and I don't like how everything is being tokenized." And but I think these days I take a little bit of a different opinion on it. I've actually converted from somebody who didn't trade that much to I trade basically all day, every day. And I mean, it's just like it's a part of the.
This is stuff that gives you the revenue stuff.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I feel like people, and of course there's bad sides of this industry with the whole like speculation thing and everything being tokenized, and there's a lot of rug pulls and bad actors. But I think, and I've said this before, the current state of the market is exactly as I would expect it to be with what we're building as an industry. It's like you're building an open permissionless tech, decentralized ledger that anybody can do whatever they want on. And it's primarily a financial instrument. And so what happens? People are going to do whatever they want, and they're not being censored. So you have this just like raw, unfiltered humanity, and you have whatever people demand. And what people demand is speculation, or they demand whatever they're using. And right now, the number one use case is speculation and trading AI agent tokens or whatever. And like what's the most recent thing? It's internet capital markets or whatever they call it. So whatever new narrative pops up that's running market caps to 500K or 2 million or whatever, this is great, but it's always going to be a reflection of what people want. And if that's what people want right now, then great, because that's exactly what blockchains were designed to serve. It's not what I think is right or wrong, or what I think is a good use case or a bad use case. It doesn't matter what I think or what what Vitalik thinks. It matters what people want, and that's it's a representation of the freedom that this technology enables. Is that you truly have the freedom to do whatever you want, and the markets reflect that. And so I no longer have a problem necessarily with like the way that the markets are going and the fact that everything is hyper speculative. I think this is not a problem with our industry or with the market. If anything, if you want to criticize that, then it's a problem with people, because the market and blockchain is just a reflection of what people want to do. And because there's no rules, it's very raw. And so I think that's actually, it's a positive thing, because that's kind of the reason why everything here is being built. It's because you can do these things, and because there is no filter and there's nobody that gets to say this is good or this is bad or this is a good thing that you can do or this is extractive or whatever. It's just, you have to have the collective people decide what they want. And so I think, that's my view, is that it's actually a positive thing. It's proving the whole thesis with this technology is that it is truly permissionless and you can actually do whatever you want. And there's no boundaries. It doesn't matter who you are or what your views are or anything. You can participate. And so I think this is, for me, it's been a point of realization, over the past year, that this is kind of exactly what you want if you really care about blockchain. It is where the market is today. Now, of course, I hope that, things will broaden, and I think that people will find more things to get excited about beyond just pure speculation, tokenization. I think you'll see more things like, healthcare and industries be shaped by blockchain. But I think in the short term, with what we've built right now, this is what it is, and I think it's great. It's exactly what we want.
Yeah. Current state of blockchain is PvP after all, right? It's a free for all. We're building all of these tools to make sure that we're PvPing more efficiently, right?
Exactly.
Particle Network here is solving issues with multiple different networks, right? So it would eventually make us PvP more efficiently across different networks, basically, right, Tabasco?
Exactly.
So yeah, if you're a dev, check out their SDK, which will come out very soon. By the time this episode releases, I'm sure it'll be out, and I'll definitely be linking all the Universal X stuff down below in the tweet as well. So if you're a trader, definitely check that out. Tabasco, thank you very much for your time. I think this is the end of our current episode.
Thank you, man. This is dope. Very good questions, and I appreciate you having me on again.
Awesome. And yeah, this is your host, Jack, signing off. I'll see you guys the next one. See ya.